So, in terms of what criteria do you believe are essential for hiring rapidly growing B2B sales guys? And how do you identify those candidates who can adopt to such an scaling and high growth environments?
Yeah, great question. So this is kind of something I alluded to a few minutes ago when I talked about salespersons. There's, there's the salespeople that work for, Salesforce and Palo Alto Networks and Slack and, and large companies. And it's a very different skill set versus working for a startup. I mean, at a large company, you typically have a playbook. Many times you even specialize in a specific vertical, a specific use case. You have a bunch of people around you. The product is much more mature. You have a brand name, etc. As opposed to a startup where nobody is familiar with the name. The product is, it's probably more of an MVP than a product. And so, you really have to work closely with the product managers, with the engineering team, constantly prioritize features, give them feedback. I've been at companies where I literally had to do the security audits myself, and I'm not a security person. Where I had to define features very, very specifically and actually get the requirements from customers. It's a very different skill set. So, your early salespeople are probably going to be more builders than, your large enterprise salespeople. I've seen that more often than not, that, you take someone who was, a sales leader at a very large company, and you give him a VP or a COO title at a smaller company. A very, very different skill set, and I rarely see that transition work. Again, as an early stage salesperson, you really have little to work with, and you really have to roll up your sleeve and do a lot of things that typically at a larger company you wouldn't do. So a couple of things that I typically look for. First of all, I look for startup experience. Like I said, I think that working for a startup requires a different mentality than working for a large company, and I've rarely seen that transition work. I look for someone that, at a startup, one thing you don't have is you don't have time, and you don't have capacity to mentor someone. So you don't have 3-6 months for that person to get to know the industry and get to know the persona and understand the need, etc. So I typically, the first salespeople that I hire are typically more experienced. So they've been around, they've seen a few companies, they've seen different sales processes, and so they, it's typically not their first closing wall or the second closing wall. They typically sell to that persona and understand both the persona as well as the need, but most importantly, the persona. I think that selling to a VP sales versus selling to a VP of engineering, it's literally two different types of people, different characteristics, different personas. And so you really need to understand how to speak to that person, especially in a startup where, again, as opposed to a larger enterprise where you might be coming to a meeting with an SE and, maybe a product manager, and so they can kind of fill the gaps. Here, you pretty much, most of the time, it's yourself. So you really got to know the persona very well. I typically I search for curiosity. I think that good salespeople are always curious. They're asking questions. When you ask a lot of questions, you actually uncover a lot of pain points, as opposed to, there's the reason why they say we have 1 mouth and 2 ears. So when you ask a lot of questions, you typically learn a lot of information that you can use down the line. And so again, I look for curiosity. I look for the ability to learn. Again, you still, you might be familiar with the persona, but not 100% with the need. Things that, again, I've been doing that. I've been the COO for, 5 companies. I'm consulting quite a few startups, and I find that, maybe 70% of what I did in the past, still works, but there's always some variances because the product is slightly different, the need is slightly different. And so your ability to kind of identify where something that worked in the past doesn't work, and iterate. First of all, as you build the playbook, that's very important. And two, I think it's a good attribute at any startup. And lastly, I look for people that have done things as opposed to people that have been at the right place at the right time. So again, if you're and I have nothing against Salesforce, I'm just taking that as an example. If you work for Salesforce in the 2015 era or maybe 2012 era, where CRM was growing, I mean, if you were just there, great. Same thing for GitHub, same thing. There were a lot of companies that Slack, there were a lot of companies that, were just on a tremendous trajectory. And if you're just there, you had the brand, you had the product, it was very easy to sell. For many startups, that's not the case. And so there's objections, there's competition, you really need to get in the door. You need to convince someone that he has a need, worth solving. And so I typically like to look for people that have been in competitive situations, that have sold complex products, or sold products in, that it wasn't just trivial to sell that. And so again, I like people that have been there, done that, as opposed to just being in the right place at the right time.